The sound of steel against gravel cut through the quiet morning. Not the comforting rattle of tools at work, but the jagged scrape of something dragged with intent. Dalton Reed froze on his porch, a chipped mug of coffee halfway to his lips. His late wife's mug, the last one she ever used. Across the street, under the pale wash of dawn, Karen Peton was crouched at his driveway like a sheriff about to stage a raid. Her orange HOA vest glowed against the misty air. She was threading a heavy chain through the wheel of his moving truck, each clink deliberate, like a jailer savoring the sound of closing cell. Dalton's stomach knotted. Not today, he muttered, more to Sarah's memory than to himself. The cabin was waiting. The lake, the quiet, the chance to finally breathe again. He had 1 foot out of the graveyard of memories this house had become. And Karen, the self-appointed warden of Meadowbrook Estates, wasn't going to stop him. "Ma'am," the moving driver called nervously from behind the truck. You can't just, you don't get a say." Karen stood up sharply, chain padlock snapping shut with a metallic finality. Her voice carried across the cul-de-sac with the righteous fury of a prophet. "This man is not authorized to vacate community property. He has failed to comply with Article 47, Section B, Subclause 3. Neighbors' curtains twitched. A dog barked. Dalton felt every eye watching, waiting for the showdown. This was how Karen operated, through spectacle, through fear. Dalton stepped down his porch steps slowly, the air sharp with the scent of mulch from Karen's obsessively maintained flower beds. His boots crunched gravel as he walked toward her, each step a reminder of Sarah's absence. She should have been here beside him, shaking her head at the absurdity, squeezing his hand to steady him. Instead, her glasses still sat on the nightstand inside, collecting dust. "You're out of line, Karen," he said evenly. Karen squared her shoulders, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Her manicured nails tapped the plastic with a staccato rhythm. Click, 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 the sound every homeowner here had learned to dread. "This isn't your decision, Dalton," she said, her smile wide and artificial, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "You think you can just abandon your responsibilities? Walk away without consequences? No, not in my neighborhood." "Your neighborhood?" Dalton's voice rose before he could stop it. "I paid off my house 10 years ago. My taxes are current. My name's on that deed." Karen's eyes flickered, just for a moment. Then she leaned in closer, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "The numbers on your mailbox belong to us," she whispered. "Your driveway, your fence, your house, every brick. Nothing leaves without my signature. You don't breathe without my signature." The word sent a cold prickle down Dalton's neck. For a flash, he saw not a neighbor, but a predator, calculating, hungry, convinced of her dominion. The driver swore under his breath. "Sir, I want no part of this circus." "If she calls the cops," "She already did," Karen interrupted, holding up her phone. "And when they arrive, they'll see a man stealing from his community." Dalton blinked. "Stealing? From my own house. From our community." Her voice grew shrill, meant for the audience gathering behind blinds and windows. "You think you can run, Dalton Reed? You think grief gives you special permission?" Grief. The word struck harder than the chains ever could. Dalton's jaw tightened. He thought of Sarah at Lake Hartwell, casting her line into the sunset. "Someday we'll retire here," she'd said. Someday had come without her. And Karen dared to wield that wound like a weapon. A rustle drew his attention. Mrs. Samantha, his elderly neighbor, she shook her head faintly, lips pressed tight, too afraid to intervene. Others peeked out, but retreated when Karen's sharp gaze swept across them. This wasn't just about him. Karen had all of them bound in her chains, visible and invisible alike. Dalton took out his phone, thumb hovering over the record button. Then let the world see this, he said quietly. Karen's smile faltered as the red recording light blinked alive. Behind Dalton, a new voice broke the tension. Calm, firm, familiar. Dad. Dalton turned. His son, Marcus Reed, stood at the edge of the driveway in a dark suit, badge glinting at his belt. His presence cut through the fog like a blade. Karen's confidence wavered, just for a second, and Dalton, for the first time in 2 years, felt the faintest flicker of hope. The sirens arrived before the coffee cooled. Blue and red strobes washed across the manicured lawns of Meadowbrook Estates, painting Karen in a glow that seemed almost ceremonial. She stood tall at her vest, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, as if the flashing lights were her coronation. 2 patrol cars rolled to a stop, doors opening with a groan of authority. Officer Martinez, broad-shouldered and weary-eyed, stepped out first. He had the look of a man who'd seen enough neighborhood disputes to last a lifetime, yet none quite like this. "Morning, folks," he said flatly. "Someone called about a theft in progress." Karen pointed at Dalton like a zealot identifying a heretic. "That man is attempting to steal community assets. Lock him up before he escapes." Dalton swallowed his frustration and forced calm into his voice. "Officer, I own this house. Paid off mortgage, property taxes current, moving with legal paperwork." Martinez raised a brow. "It's, Mum? What exactly is he stealing?" Karen's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. "His mailbox, the numbers, his driveway." And she glanced at Dalton's keyring, community blueprint stored on his house keys. For a moment, silence hung heavy, punctuated only by the nervous cough of the moving driver. "Ma'am," Martinez said slowly, "mailboxes and house numbers are issued, not owned, and keys belong to the homeowner." Karen bristled. "The bylaws don't override state property law." Martinez cut her off. He turned to Dalton, softening. "Sir, you're free to move your belongings. Just maybe give us a heads up if things escalate again." Karen's face cracked, fury bleeding through the cracks of her polished composure. She looked around, expecting her backup. Neighbors lined windows and porches, but no one moved. Not even Tom, the fence-fearing next-door neighbor she'd bullied for years. Dalton felt a shift, a tiny one, but real, the air loosening, the silence carrying less fear and more defiance. Karen's nails clicked furiously against her clipboard. Click, click, click. The sound was shakier now, like a drummer losing rhythm. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Dalton, her voice low enough to be meant only for him. "You think your grief buys you freedom? You think your little FBI son scares me?" Dalton's chest tightened. He glanced toward Marcus, who stood calmly, arms crossed, badge glinting under the flashing lights. Marcus's presence was quiet power, not theatrical, but Karen was right. His son was now in this fight, and Karen had just underestimated the wrong man. The officers departed with a warning, the sirens fading into the distance. But the neighborhood remained awake, buzzing like a hive disturbed. Dalton watched curtains flutter shut, but he caught whispers, fragments of conversations carried on the breeze. "She can't keep doing this. She chained his truck, did you see? What if she turns on us next?" Dalton felt the weight of their voices, of their silent plea. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. Inside his house, the rooms felt colder than usual. Sarah's absence lingered in every corner. The unwashed mug, the neatly folded sweater draped over a chair, the faint lavender scent of her perfume that stubbornly clung to the air. He touched the edge of her reading glasses on the nightstand, the familiar ache rising. He whispered, "I'm trying, Sarah. I'm really trying." A soft knock at the door broke the moment. It was Mrs. Samantha, shawl wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders, eyes darting toward Karen's mansion across the street. She's not going to stop, she said quietly, almost trembling. Last month she tried to take my shed, said it violated setback requirements, brought fake papers, demanded I sign it over. I thought maybe it was just me. But now, her voice cracked. You can't let her win, Dalton. Her words sank deep. This wasn't grief-driven paranoia. This was systemic. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was predatory. Dalton nodded slowly. You've been keeping records? Mrs. Samantha's eyes flickered with something like guilt, then resolve. 3 years of them. Every letter, every fee, every threat. She leaned closer, her whisper carrying the weight of confession. And I'm not the only one. The truth rippled in Dalton's mind like a stone dropped in still water. Karen wasn't a tyrant of order. She was a thief cloaked in authority. And if Samantha had records, others must too. Dalton closed his eyes, imagining Sarah's neat handwriting, her files, the way she used to keep everything documented. For a moment, he felt as though she was guiding him, even from beyond. When he opened them, Marcus was standing in the doorway, silent but alert. Dad, he said, voice steady. This isn't just neighborhood drama anymore. What she's doing, it has a pattern. I've seen it before, in fraud cases. Dalton met his son's gaze, and for the first time since Sarah's passing, felt the pulse of purpose in his veins. The chains on his truck were just the beginning. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It arrived in silence. Dalton found the envelope on his kitchen counter 2 nights later. A manila folder, out of place, edges curling like it had been handled too many times. He hadn't put it there. He hadn't seen it before. Yet it sat waiting, brazen and still, as if daring him to open it. He hesitated. The living room light buzzed softly overhead. Sarah's sweater still hung across the chair. The weight of absence pressed heavy on his chest. His hand trembled as he unfastened the clasp. Inside were bank statements, dozens of them, transfers from Meadowbrook Estates' HOA account into something called Community Improvement Solutions, LLC. The amounts were irregular but consistent, thousands siphoned off each month. Some pages had yellow highlighter across them. Some bore faint notes in a careful hand he recognized instantly. Sarah's handwriting. The air left Dalton's lungs in a rush. His vision blurred. He braced himself against the counter. She had known. Sarah had been investigating Karen long before cancer silenced her questions. He turned a page, and there it was, her familiar script along the margin. Cross-check with Brenda. Same dates. Same amounts. Shell company. Dalton's throat tightened. Brenda, Karen's sister. Marcus appeared in the doorway, drawn by his father's stillness. He took one look at the documents, and his expression sharpened from curiosity to cold, professional focus. Dad, he said carefully, where did you get these? Dalton shook his head. I don't know. I came home, and they were just here. His voice cracked. It's her handwriting, Marcus. Your mother's. Marcus pulled out his phone, snapping photos with deliberate precision. These transfers aren't random. They're structured, just under reporting thresholds. That's money laundering 101. Dalton felt his pulse hammering in his temples. Sarah was onto this before she died. She never told me. Maybe she was protecting you. Marcus said softly. His eyes lingered on the notes, then on his father. Or maybe she didn't want you dragged into it until she had proof. Dalton gripped the counter, the edges biting into his palms. A swirl of grief, rage, and revelation churned inside him. Sarah's absence suddenly felt like presence, like she had left breadcrumbs, a trail meant for them to follow. He closed the folder slowly. She wanted Karen exposed. Marcus nodded once. Then that's what we'll do. Outside, the neighborhood was cloaked in uneasy quiet. Porch lights glowed like watchful eyes. Dalton stepped to the window and spotted Karen pacing across her lawn. Phone pressed to her ear, voice rising and falling in sharp bursts. Even from here, he could see the erratic gestures, the way her gaze darted toward his house. She was unraveling, and now Dalton knew why. A knock startled him. He opened the door to find Mrs. Samantha again, this time with a folder so thick it bowed in her arms. Her hand shook as she thrust it forward. "I've been keeping these," she whispered. "Letters, notices, fake Venus. Every dime she's extorted." She looked over her shoulder before meeting his eyes. "You're not alone in this, Dalton. We've all been too scared. But I saw the police leave here the other day. You didn't back down. And now, I think we can fight." Dalton accepted the weight of her folder. Inside were spreadsheets, photocopied checks, threat letters on letterhead that looked official but reeked of forgery. Marcus leaned over, scanning quickly. His jaw tightened. "Dad, this isn't just harassment. It's organized theft. She's been running a racket under the guise of HOA authority." Dalton's grip tightened on Sarah's mug still in his hand, the one he hadn't been able to put away since she died. His wife had fought this fight in silence, alone, and Karen had dared to twist her power, even as Sarah weakened. The rage that welled in him was new, hotter than grief, steadier than despair. He turned to Marcus. "What happens now?" Marcus's eyes hardened with resolve. "Now we build a case. And we don't stop until she's in handcuffs." Dalton exhaled, the first breath that didn't taste like ashes since Sarah's death. The fear in the neighborhood, the chains on his truck, the sham rules. It was all part of something bigger. And suddenly he wasn't running anymore. He was standing his ground. Outside, Karen's laugh rang sharp in the night, brittle and manic. She had no idea that the game had shifted, that Sarah's ghost had just entered the fight. Dalton whispered into the quiet house, to the space where his wife's memory lingered. "We'll finish what you started." The turning point wasn't leaving Meadowbrook Estates. It was staying. The next week turned the neighborhood into a pressure cooker. Karen's war escalated in ways that defied logic. The moving company called first, voice tight, nervous. "Mr. Reed, we just received a cease and desist letter. Claims were aiding criminal activity by transporting stolen assets." The letterhead says Peton Legal Services. Dalton clenched the phone. Peton Legal Services doesn't exist. The dispatcher hesitated. "Maybe not, but our insurance carrier is spooked. If this gets uglier, we might have to pull out." Another chain yanked tight around his life. 2 days later, Dalton woke to find his locks changed. Gleaming new deadbolts, polished handles. Taped to the door. Property secured under HOA authority. Access restricted. He paid a locksmith $80 to break into his own house. Inside, drawers were rifled, his medicine cabinet left ajar. The violation seeped into his skin, leaving him raw and restless. Marcus photographed everything with the calm of a man who'd done this too many times before. "Breaking and entering," he muttered, "and burglary if she took anything. This is federal if she crossed state lines communicating about it." Dalton's fists curled. "She's not just harassing me. She's tearing apart every piece of Sarah's memory in this house." His voice cracked on her name. Marcus set a hand on his shoulder. "Then we stopped letting her set the rules." But Karen wasn't done. At midnight, the doorbell rang. Dalton opened the door to find her standing there in what looked like a security guard uniform from a costume shop, flashlight blazing in his eyes. "Emergency HOA inspection," she slurred, breath sour with wine. "Article 23C allows surprise checks for safety violations." Dalton blocked the doorway, every muscle trembling with rage. "There is no Article 23C. Get off my porch, Karen." Her voice rose, manic. "You don't decide what's real. I am the authority here." Porch lights flickered on across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked out, their fear no longer just silent. It was visible, palpable, shared. Dalton slammed the door, called the police again, but the damage was done. Sleep became impossible. The house's stage for Karen's theater of control. By morning, the real escalation arrived. A notice taped to his door. Lien, $15,000 owed in community fees. Itemized nonsense filled the page. Landscape noncompliance, architectural deviations, even community participation deficiency charges for missing HOA meetings while Sarah was in chemo. Dalton's hands shook with fury. She's rewriting my grief as debt. Marcus examined the papers, jaw rigid. Forgery. Fraud. Dad, she just crossed into felony territory. Then came the call that broke something inside Dalton. Child Protective Services. Mr. Reed, we've received a report questioning your son Marcus's mental stability. Given his position with the FBI, Dalton nearly dropped the phone. You're saying she's going after my son's career? The caseworker's voice was calm, procedural. We are required to follow up on any claims. Dalton ended the call with hands trembling so violently he could barely set the receiver down. His chest heaved. The walls felt like they were closing in. Sarah's sweater on the chair caught his eye. Her careful script in the files Marcus had spread across the table. Notes, dates, arrows. A trail she had built while dying. She had known this monster. She had seen it coming. Dalton sank into the chair, pressing the sweater to his face. Grief surged in hot waves. Helplessness, rage, love that refused to die. I couldn't save you, he whispered, his voice ragged. But I swear to God, I'll finish this for you. Marcus's voice cut through, firm and steady. Dad, this isn't just harassment anymore. It's organized crime. I've been talking to the Bureau. She's on their radar now. Dalton lifted his head. His son's eyes were steel, unflinching. Mrs. Samantha knocked softly at the door, stepping in with her thick folder of records. Behind her came Tom, sheepish but resolute, followed by Janet Morrison, the HOA vice president, and two more neighbors. Each carried papers, receipts, stories. Each carried fear turned into courage. Dalton looked around the room. His kitchen table transformed into a war council. For the first time, he wasn't standing alone against Karen. Marcus spread the documents across the table like a general arranging maps before a battle. This is enough to trigger a federal investigation. Fraud, racketeering, mail fraud, Guide Froth, and if she touched that lien notice, aggravated identity theft. Dalton touched Sarah's handwriting again, her note marked in the margin. Make Karen pay. The weight of grief shifted into resolve. The stage was set. Karen thought she was tightening chains. Instead, she was building her own gallows. The community center smelled of folding chairs and fear. 89 homeowners packed the narrow room, shoulders brushing, whispers threading through the air like static. Cameras from 3 local news stations lined the back wall. Karen had invited them herself, confident enough to turn her madness into a stage play. Dalton sat in the front row, Marcus beside him, FBI credentials visible in his jacket pocket. Mrs. Samantha clutched her swollen folder like a shield. The weight of Sarah's absence pressed against Dalton's ribs, but tonight it felt less like emptiness and more like presence, like she was standing in the wings, watching. Karen stepped onto the stage with the poise of a queen, her tailored suit shimmering under fluorescent lights. She adjusted the microphone with the ease of someone certain she was untouchable. Her smile cut sharp across the room. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice sugar-sweet but taut with manic energy. Thank you for attending this emergency session. We are here to address a conspiracy that threatens not just Meadowbrook Estates, but the very integrity of our community. Gasps, whispers. Karen raised a stack of papers high, waving them like sacred scripture. This man, her fingers stabbed the air toward Dalton, has stolen hundreds of thousands in community funds. He has corrupted federal agents. He has weaponized grief to mask his crimes. Dalton didn't flinch. He pressed record on his phone. Karen's words spilled out faster, feverish. These documents prove everything. Transfers, invoices, shell companies. A pattern of theft stretching back years. Dalton's heart lurched as she brandished the very files Sarah had compiled. The meticulous notes, the highlighted bank statements. Sarah's proof. His wife's last fight. But Karen wasn't exposing them. She was confessing without realizing it. Every number, every transfer she read aloud pointed straight at her. The room stirred. Janet Morrison, the HOA vice president, rose from her chair. Karen, we've all seen those documents. They don't prove Dalton stole from us. They prove you did. Karen's smile faltered, then cracked. Lies, she spat. You're all in on it. Traitors. Mrs. Samantha's voice, soft but steady, carried across the silence. You offered me $5,000 to stay quiet last week. I recorded it. Gasps rippled. Neighbors shifted, eyes darting from Karen to Dalton to the evidence clutched in trembling hands. Karen's eyes darted wildly. You think you could turn on me? I built this place. I am his community. That was the moment Marcus stood. Calm, unyielding. He opened his jacket just enough for the badge to catch the light. Mrs. Peton, he said, his voice carrying the authority of iron wrapped in velvet. I'm Special Agent Marcus Reed, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I am here in an official capacity. A hush fell over the room, deep and absolute. Karen's face drained of color. She stumbled back a step. You can't. This is harassment. You can't. Two men in dark suits at the back of the room rose. Their movements were measured, professional. The crowd parted instinctively as they walked forward. Agent Williams, Marcus's supervisor, spoke with clipped precision. Karen Peton, you're under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and obstruction of federal investigation. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed louder than any gavel. Cameras flashed. Neighbors gasped. Karen thrashed, voice cracking into hysteria. I'm the victim. They're conspiring against me. I am the authority here. But her words were drowned out by something Dalton never expected. Applause. It began with Mrs. Samantha, her hands trembling, then spread like fire through the room. 89 voices clapping, cheering, releasing years of fear in one collective roar. Dalton rose slowly. His knees ached, his chest heavy, but for the first time since Sarah's death, he felt lifted, carried by something larger than grief. As Karen was led past him, wrists bound, he looked her in the eyes. He didn't need to speak. She saw it there. The promise Sarah had left behind fulfilled. Outside, the night blazed red and blue as Karen was loaded into the back of a federal SUV. The cameras caught it all. Her manic protests, the FBI's calm precision, the neighbors' jubilation. Mrs. Samantha stepped to the podium, voice breaking but resolute. Sarah Reed gave her last months to gathering this evidence. Tonight, we honor her courage. Dalton closed his eyes as the room erupted again, the sound of applause shaking the rafters. For the first time in 2 years, he felt her hand in his, not a memory, but a presence steady and proud. The climax wasn't Karen's downfall. It was Sarah's victory. 3 months later, Dalton sat on the porch of the cabin Sarah had once dreamed about. The lake spread out before him, a sheet of glass, catching the morning sun in shades of gold and rose. Pine-scented air drifted across the water, cool and clean, untainted by the battles he'd left behind. The moving truck was long gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of crickets, the call of distant herons, and the silence Sarah had always craved. Her favorite coffee blend steamed in his mug. He raised it slowly, letting the warmth seep into his hands. The ceramic wasn't chipped like her old cup at home, but he could almost imagine she was here, bare feet on the deck, hair swept by the mountain breeze, eyes crinkling as she cast her line into the sunrise. On the newspaper folded beside him, the headline was stark: HOA president sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Karen Peton. Her name no longer carried fear, only consequence. The courtroom had been packed with neighbors who once cowered under her gaze. They'd listened as prosecutors recited the charges: mail fraud, wire fraud, racketeering, identity theft. They'd watched as the judge, unmoved by Karen's trembling pleas, declared her a danger to every community she touched. The total restitution exceeded $500,000, enough to rebuild what she had stolen, enough to breathe life back into Meadowbrook Estates. Dalton could still see the moment Mrs. Samantha took the treasurer's seat at the first post-Karen HOA meeting, spreadsheets spread like wings in front of her. "Transparency is not optional," she'd said, her voice steady as stone. And for the first time in years, neighbors had nodded without fear. Marcus had returned to D.C., a changed man too. Not just a son who defended his father, but an agent whose case would become bureau training material. He'd told Dalton over the phone, "They're calling it the Peton pattern. We're already uncovering similar scams in 3 states." His voice had carried pride, but also something softer. "Mom would have been proud of both of us, Dad." Dalton let the words echo in the quiet cabin now. Mom would have been proud. He thought of Sarah's files, her careful handwriting, her last note scrawled in fading ink. Make Karen pay. She had given him more than instructions. She had given him a purpose beyond grief, a reason to rise each morning even when the bed felt like a tomb. The lake rippled with the first breeze of the day. Dalton stood, walking slowly to the water's edge. The tackle box sat open, Sarah's old lures catching the light. He picked one up, thumb brushing against the worn paint, and cast the line with a motion that felt like muscle memory borrowed from her. The line arced through the air, kissed the lake, and vanished beneath the surface. Dalton exhaled. For the first time since Sarah's passing, the silence didn't feel hollow. It felt whole. Behind him, his phone buzzed with messages from neighbors, reporters, even strangers across the country. HOA reform bills were passing in state after state, spurred by Meadowbrook's scandal. Dalton's story had traveled further than he ever imagined. People quoting Sarah's notes, communities rising against their own tyrants. But he didn't pick up the phone. Not yet. This moment was hers. The sky shifted from rose to blue, clouds parting to let the sun break across the tree line. Dalton reeled the line back slowly, savoring the weight of it, the tug against his hand, the living proof that something still answered when he reached out. He lifted his mug toward the horizon, toward the place where morning met memory. "We did it, sweetheart," he whispered. The words carried across the lake, dissolving into the air, becoming part of the stillness. For a long time he stood there, breathing, waiting, and in the hush between wind and water, he swore he felt her, Sarah's hand, light as mist on his shoulder, steadying him one last time. The fight was over, but her legacy had just begun.